And I just want to welcome you to NC Focus. This is a series that we started to highlight issues that are currently under discussion in town. Because civic engagement and education are core to the library's mission, as well as to this series' co-sponsor, the New Canaan League of Women Voters. So to that end, each NC Focus provides the public with a comprehensive and credible way to learn firsthand, either from the municipal leaders who are doing what they do, or from experts who have been directly consulted by them. Tonight, we turn our attention to the town charter revision. This happens every 10 years, and we're up for renewal right now. The town charter is like our town constitution. It's a document that lays out the rules of our municipal government. It details responsibilities, decision-making power, and accountability. Our speaker tonight is Kathleen Corbet, chair of the Town Charter Revision Commission, and she's so devoted to civic life that she's here on this raw gray night when most people did not want to go out to tell us why this charter is so important, even if most people never think about it. In her 30 years in town, Kathleen has been on the Board of Selectmen, Town Council, Board of Finance, and on the previous Charter Revision Commission. So let's welcome Kathleen Corbet.
Thank you, Mickey. I think you want me to use this mic though, right? Because you're for the recording. Okay, so I'm going to actually hold it down here a little bit because I think you can hear me anyway. But I want to thank the New Canaan Library and Mickey Porta for actually setting this up as a series of programs about New Canaan Focus. And so I'm pleased to be here, especially because the topic is we're working on the Charter Revision Commission. And this is an opportunity where I've actually been going around to different groups and speaking about charter revision, because it does happen, not always every 10 years. Sometimes there's been bigger gaps. We'll talk a little bit about that. But it's always a good refresher for those people who aren't familiar, or for new people into our town in terms of the charter revision. So let me start, just going to add a little more color to what Mickey shared with you, although I think I know almost everybody here. We're welcoming somebody else just walking in. So as Mickey said, I've been actually involved in town government for 20 years. When I've had different hiatuses in between those 20 years through the different boards and commissions in which I've served, the very first person to hire me on a board, the Board of Finance, was actually Judy Neville, who's a fellow commissioner on the Charter Revision Commission with me this year. Judy, as everyone I think knows, was the former first select woman of New Canaan, and she's also served for many years on Board of Finance. And so that's how I first got to know Judy, and it's always been a pleasure to work with her. My background is actually financial services, so investments, accounting, etc. And while I was working on Wall Street for about 25 years, I thought, gee, is there something I could do to give back to the community? My husband, who's in the audience here, he was the stay-at-home parent raising our two sons, and so whenever I'd come late to a parent-teacher conference, everybody knew Randy, but nobody knew me. And I thought, well, how do I get involved in town? And I found that the best way to do that is to work with boards and committees that met in the evening, and that's where I got started in the Board of Finance. Remember those meetings started at 8 p.m.?
She was the first woman that was brought on to the Board of Finance.
Is that true? Oh my gosh, I didn't recognize that. Well, you were on it, so that was second woman. All right, but anyway, that's how I got started. That's how I felt I could maybe make some contributions to town, and so that's how I got started. It went on from there, Board of Finance for 4 years, and I took some time off. We had someone in our family who was ill, and so we took some time off there, and then I came back, and someone said, gee, Kathleen, would you be interested in running for something called the town treasurer? Now, the town treasurer position has been around for 80 years, maybe more than that. even longer, many, many years, because Don Hurston served for nearly 40 years, and his father before him also served as town treasurer. So there were some issues that we thought maybe needed another fresh set of eyes and somebody with a background in finance and accounting and bonds and so forth. So I ran. In 2012, I ran for town treasurer. It was a position that never ran opposed. And I lost that race. Jim Bell can tell you, he remembers that. And I lost that race by 47 votes. Nonetheless, we brought together some issues that needed some, second set of eyes looking at. And so shortly thereafter, I was actually asked by the then first selectman, Rob Malazzi, if I'd consider, on an interim basis, being the town CFO. Our CFO had left for Westport, and so we had an interim period of about 6 months or so where I came in and served as CFO for the town until someone of a more permanent position was taken. So it gave me a chance to look at the town from both externally and being on, for instance, the Board of Finance, and also internally in terms of the operations of how the town works. After that opportunity, someone came forward and said, would you like to run for town council? So I did that as well. That was also a competitive race, and I did run for town council and did win. And I served on the town council for 4 years, took a break again. And it wasn't until, many of you might know, Kit Devereaux, who served on the Board of Selectmen. She unfortunately moved to Annapolis, and so there was an opening, there was a vacancy on the Board of Selectmen, and I was asked to consider serving out her term, and then I ran for election again when that term was over. So I served as a member of the Board of Selectmen for about 3.5 years. Took another break, and then the opportunity came forward to consider being on the board or the commission of the charter revision. Now this is, I sort of skipped over the fact that I actually did this 10 years ago. And so Judy has served so many years in our town government. So I think you and I are the only members who've actually served in town government in an elected role. Because we have a member of the Board of Finance, which is appointed. So we've seen both sides. We've seen both appointed boards and we've seen elected boards. And so we bring that knowledge to the Charter Commission. So anyway, stop there. That's just giving you some of my background. And let me just tell you a little bit about the Charter Revision Commission. And as Mickey said, this is something that comes up every 10 years. That's by state statute. That the charter, that the legislative body, which here in New Canaan is the town council, must consider at least every 10 years whether or not the charter, which is it's the document that basically sets the foundation of how our town operates, whether it's a parking commission, police, fire, the town council, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance. Each one of those bodies is described in the town charter, and the provisions and the duties and the responsibilities for each one of those roles is identified in the town charter. The town charter was first established actually in 1935, when the town of New Canaan actually was in two types of formations. One was called the Borough of New Canaan, and that was here in the central part of downtown New Canaan. And the other organization, or if you will, was the town of New Canaan. So it's two bodies, two groups of officers, if you will. The taxes were applied to both the borough, again, centrally located here, and externally in the town of New Canaan. And in the whole notion of it might not be broke, but why not make it better? The town itself decided to come together and said, you know what, we don't want to have two bodies. We don't want to have two separate offices. Let's bring the town of New Canaan and the borough of New Canaan together. And that was done through a special act by the General Assembly in the state in 1935. First, the town voted on it, and then it went up to the state for a special act. Welcome. We can pass something. And so just for, I've always got to check this out. Anybody have, this is a quiz for everybody, anybody have an idea what the population of New Canaan was in 1935 when we brought the borough of New Canaan and the town of New Canaan together, renamed it the town of Committee? Any guess? 4,000. Okay, so in 1935, and of course they only took the census every 10 years then, but so the midpoint between 1930 at 5,400 people and 1940 at 6,200, so the midpoint 5,800 residents here in New Canaan. So a small group, but that's where the statute that identified what does the Board of Selectmen do? What is there was a commission that at that time that called the Commission of Public Welfare. Its roles and responsibilities were to care for the needy and care for delinquent children who might not be going to school, et cetera. So their role as the Board of Public Welfare was identified in this state statute. 30 years later, in 1965, the town decided, well, we're going to come up with our own structure that is going to be identified in what was the town charter. And virtually everything, except for some of the changes that took place in terms of the boards, that's when they added the town council, for instance. That's where they added more specifically health and human services, police and fire. It was called public safety back then. And so this is where the foundation was made for what is now the town charter. So again, 1965. Anybody have an idea? Jim, should I ask you again? What do you think the population was 30 years later? So you were about 5,800 in 1935. 30 years later, it was 67. So it was in 1965, when it was, so it was 15,000. 15,000, yeah. Okay, very close. Okay, so huge growth when you think about that, over 30 years, very significant growth. Today, as you know, we're at 20,000, over 20,000 in terms of population. That really hasn't changed much in the last 10 years, maybe about 500. So not a big increase, but the change in how we think about how we're governed in terms of the charter, let me just throw out some of the things that has happened over the last 10 years. Okay, so the charter 10 years ago, we had the same kind of commission. At that time, 9 people came together. They're voted on by the town council. Were brought together. We sat and we go through every article in the town charter. Every single board and commission, every single elected position is outlined in the charter and defined. And we would go through and decide whether or not any change was necessary. Does anybody remember what those changes were 10 years ago? Judy knows. Jim? So I'll repeat that. So the charter 10 years ago for the town council, it allowed the electorate, each one of you, the voters, to go in, even though there were 6 seats up, there were 6 people running for the town council, you only had 4 votes. So you couldn't vote. You could have had 8 people running, you only had 4 votes. So one of the things that the Charter Revision Commission did 10 years ago, we said, well, that doesn't seem to be quite right, and why don't we make it for as many seats that are available to be filled, you can vote up to 6. So that change was made. That was put before the electorate, and it was well over 2/3 of the voters said, yes, we want the right to vote for 6 seats. So I'll repeat what Jim said. So the second thing, Jim knows all of these from 10 years ago. Somehow you remember. So the other big thing that went before the electorate and the ballot was that the Board of Finance had always for years had the chairman was also the first selectman. Judy knows that and did a very good job, by the way, doing that. But at that point, 10 years ago, the question was, is that still appropriate? And should we have an independent chair that is elected by the body itself, the Board of Finance actually, every year or every 2 years comes together and votes on who that chairman should be. We put that out to the electorate, and they said, yes, that's also something that they wanted. So that changed. It was a big change in terms of the governance of the Board of Finance. I'll mention one other. That the first selectman remains on the Board of Finance as an ex officio member. That's correct. One other thing I'll mention, and then I'll want to bring us forward 10 years. One other thing we thought, the Charter Revision Commission thought, gee, the Board of Finance is the only board and commission in town that actually requires anyone who sits on that board not only to be an elector, those who can vote, but you also have to be a taxpayer. You also have to own real estate. So that seemed to preclude people who might rent. In fact, we had a member of the Board of Finance who served, sold his home of 30 years, moved down to town, and was renting his property. He no longer qualified under the charter to still serve on the Board of Finance. We were lucky enough to get him onto the town council, but there was a period of time where he no longer had that right to serve as because he wasn't a taxpayer. We thought, gee, that's the only board in the town, the only commission that actually requires the taxpayer. You have to be a taxpayer. Was that the intention? You could be on the Board of Selectmen. You don't have to be a taxpayer. You could rent. You could be on Board of Education. You can be on lots of boards and commissions, and the only one that requires that is the Board of Finance. We put that on the ballot 10 years ago thinking, oh yeah, you don't have to be a taxpayer. You could be a renter. That's perfectly fine. And the voters said, no. We want it to stay the same. That's called the skin in the game. We want the members of the Board of Finance to have the skin in the game, be the taxpayers, so that by 2/3 voted down not to make that change. So that was the only thing, and there was 2 other things that were basically added, boards and commissions that weren't on the charter, and some other, grammatical things and some other minor changes. And so every change that's made to the charter goes before the electorate, goes before the board. So let's talk about what are some of the things that are being considered today. And I'm happy to take your questions as we go along, but let's move forward and tell you what's before the commission today. The commission is made up of 11 members. The process by which we were selected is that there was a public hearing. They said we're going to go through, the town council said we're going to open up the charter. Those of you who are interested to participate in charter revision, send us your CV, send us your resume, send us your level of interest of what makes you think you're qualified to serve. And we'll, as a body, the town council as a body, reviewed, I think there was, Judy, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was over 20 submissions of individuals who expressed interest. And once they decided they were going to open up the charter again in October, it was in November, that 11 of us were named as commissioners. And actually on your sheet there are probably names that you know and some names you might not know, but all are equally bring something to the table. It's a diverse group. Coming from all different backgrounds. So Judy and I are privileged to be able to work with everybody there, and because everybody brings something different to the table. So it's really a good working group. So what are some of the things? So the very first thing the Charter Revision Commission has to do is it has to have a public hearing. It has to hear from the town council. It has to hear from the public. What is it that you'd like to see perhaps changed, or you want to understand better about the charter? And we got a whole list of things. It's still open to the public every meeting that we've had. We've had, I think, well over 60 meetings by the commission, as well as small subgroups of the commission. Everybody is researching all 22 articles and elements in that charter. We're looking at other towns. We're reviewing the state statutes. We're looking at bylaws and ordinances that are other ways in which the town is governed. So we do all that research, and we then come together as a group again and then debate it. And our debates can go on for a long time, and some of them are rather easy. Let's just mention a couple that have been before the commission. They're still on, some of them are still under review. I'll go through them, and I'll want to share with you. Once we put this report, we'll go through all of these elements. We put a report together, it goes as a draft to the town council, and our first report is due on May 4th. So we have a couple weeks to get through. We're going to have a public hearing, another public hearing on Tuesday, April 14th, and again with an opportunity for people to come in and weigh in and share or just learn about what some of the proposals are. So let's go there. So some of the issues that are under review and consideration, some have already been voted on, is one example would be the size of a board and commission. I'll give you an example there. The Board of Selectmen, where Judy and I have served and under different terms, is a 3-member board. Other towns in our surrounding area have 5 members of the Board of Selectmen. Okay, what's the advantage of that? Well, most of those towns that have 5 members of the Board of Selectmen, they don't have a town council. So they're both the operational means for running the town, and they're the legislative body. We have the advantage of having both a Board of Selectmen and a town council. The town council is the legislative body. So think about that. Do you really need to add perhaps 2 more? We haven't discussed it as a group yet, but that's the question. Should that go from 3 to 5? People have asked the same thing about police commission, 3-member police commission today. Fire commission, 3 members. Should that go to 5? So there's a big debate that'll go on, but those are some of the questions that we haven't even gotten to that section yet, but that's some of the things those are some of the things that we're going to be taking a look at. Term limits. Right now, there's only one body in the charter. That's the audit committee that has term limits. That was introduced 10 years ago. That was a new thing that on the charter. The audit committee, we were the first town in Connecticut to have a formal audit committee introduced. Now many of them in Connecticut have audit committees. But we also it was the first board and commission, the only one actually in our charter, that has a 3-year term limit. So 3 terms, and each term is 3 years. So the maximum number of years you can serve would be 9, and then you have to roll off before you're invited back in, although the charter doesn't say specifically, so that would be one of the things we're going to have to modify. So the question becomes, should other boards and commissions on our charter live under term limits? Does that give us an opportunity to bring in, fresh thinking and so forth, and have a rotation process that might be necessary? Many corporate boards have term limits for different reasons. You serve for a certain amount. Many not-for-profits have term limits. Should that be something that we as a municipality should be considered? It's up for debate. We haven't gone through that yet, but that's something else that has come before us. Okay, other things are length of terms. Most boards and commissions in New Canaan, when you sign on and you're selected, it's a 3-year term. The exception is the Board of Finance is 4, and the Housing Authority is 5, but most are 3. We have 3 boards and commissions for whatever reason. Whenever they were first formed, it was a 2-year commitment. So we decided, let's go through and make this consistent. And because it's hard to always ever have to you sort of 2 years and you're up for reappointment or you're not. And so we thought, let's make them consistent. And so our proposal is going to be that they go consistently at 3 years. That will be taking 3 boards up to 3 years in terms of the service. Okay, some of the more controversial ones that have come up. As you may know, the Board of Planning and Zoning Commission is an appointed board. Unlike many boards, many planning and zoning commissions in the surrounding Fairfield County area, we're appointed. Maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, 4 other towns are also appointed in Fairfield, if that. And most of them are elected planning and zoning. So We had done an enormous amount of research. We had, obviously, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission come and speak to us. We had many people who gave us their thoughts in favor of elected or in favor of retaining it as appointed. So lots of debates on that. We looked at the pros and cons of each of that. That's actually a written document that's been posted to our website that anybody can take a look at in terms of all the points in favor of remaining appointed and all the points in favor of switching over to an elected body. Very close vote. It came in 6-5. 6 voted yes to retain the Planning and Zoning Commission as an appointed body. 4 preferred that it go to elected, and one other person wanted a bit of a hybrid approach, keep it appointed, but have the alternates be elected. So slightly different approach, but that would have been a challenging change, right? So anyway, that's just to give you a sense that actually has already been voted. Other things that have been voted, Board of Finance, same thing. We're retaining, the vote was 8-3, retaining Board of Finance as an appointed body. 2 other elected positions, the town treasurer, remember I ran for town treasurer back in 2012, and the town clerk's position, those are both elected positions. And our body, the commission, voted to retain, I don't remember the exact numbers, but the town treasurer and the town clerk to remain as elected positions. Now, saying all that, I will say that while we are keeping the status quo, there are some things that could use improving. And so you will see our proposal will include some changes that we think could help in terms of with the town clerk, the town treasurer, the Board of Finance, and the Planning and Zoning. Status quo is fine, but there's also room for improvement. And so some of the changes that we'll be putting forward in the charter will include some of those changes. I'll just maybe pick up one more and then open up for more questions. How we're doing on time? We're doing fine. So one of the things, has anybody ever thought about putting your name forward to run for or to be appointed to any board or commission in town? Anybody thought about that? Do you ever? Actually, Mickey, you have. Jim has. Barbara has. Obviously, Judy. And Laura, remind me which one you're on. I'm not on it. Okay, but you asked if we'd ever thought about it. Yeah. Okay. Great. Yes, I did ask about that. Okay. So our town, we don't. One of the things that we don't do in a way that I think could be very helpful is actually advertise where we have vacancies for openings. You wouldn't know. You happen to know a friend. Oh, so-and-so has left the board. I'll put my name forward. But you wouldn't otherwise know about it. You hear about it maybe after someone's already been appointed. So what are other towns and cities around our area? What are they doing about it? Well, so we did the research. We looked at Fairfield and Wilton and Ridgefield and Stamford and Norwalk, Greenwich. They all have they publicize when you have a vacancy. When there's a vacancy open on the Board of Finance, if there's a vacancy opening at Planning and Zoning. These very commissions that we were talking about, how can we improve that process and enable people to raise their hand and say, gee, that's something I'm interested in the Fire Commission. So we're going to be making a recommendation. I don't know to what extent the charter will actually be changed. It might be just a direct recommendation to the town council and the Board of Selectmen to say, look, going forward, this is a best practice that you should introduce, so that we open it up. We open up the aperture of those individuals who are interested. Keep in mind, right now, the people who are interested in serving oftentimes go to their political parties. The DTC, the Democratic Town Committee, the RTC, the Republican Town Committee. But I think, as many of us know here, the largest cohort of voters are unaffiliated voters here in New Canaan. They don't really have that sort of conduit or way in which they can reach out to the first selectman and they can go through a process there. But it tends to go through just one person, rather than opening it up to a body like the Board of Selectmen to take consideration of anybody who's applying. we want to build a bench strength too. Because you want to know, gee, there's somebody who has, is an architect or somebody who's in finance. So, so you have some background so that we know if we do ever come up with an opening, a vacancy, gee, who has expressed interest in serving our town and what are their credentials? One of the benefits of having an appointed Board of Finance and an appointed P&Z is that it enables us to say, oh gosh, we're missing somebody with a real estate background here or an architecture background. And whereas in an elected position, you don't always know exactly how you're going to fill the gaps that are on a board. So that's one of the advantages of thinking about remaining appointed board, where you can actually fill in the gaps and have a broad array of diverse strengths on that commission. And that's basically where we came out in terms of deciding to stay with the appointed Board of Finance and the appointed P&Z. There are lots of other reasons too, but that's just one example. So one of the things that we hope is going to come out of the work done by the Charter Revision Commission is to actually improve the way that we can advertise and invite people to be considered for boards and commissions here. We have how many boards and commissions off the top of our head? We have what? Oh, it's a lot. It's boards, commissions, and committees. I think we're at 30. Over 30, and those opportunities to participate broadly in those committees, we want to make sure that we're offering that to everyone who wants to consider being part of our community in terms of good governance. So let me stop there and let's start taking some comments or questions, and I'll start with Jim Bell.
It's not a question. I was just going to comment that
Yes.
People may not be aware that you can serve only on one commission, but you can serve on multiple committees at the same time.
Correct. So Jim brings up a good point. One of the rules under the Charter Revision Commission is I can't serve on both the Town Council and the Board of Finance, or Planning and Zoning and the Board of Education. You get one role in terms of commissions. However, you may serve on a committee. So an example might be, I don't think we have it anymore, but we used to have a deer committee, right? And so you might serve on the Board of Finance, or you might be on the Town Council. Barbara, you might have been on the deer committee, but no, it wasn't you. Okay. You remember that committee. Those committees tend to have a start and a finish. They have a purpose. And so that's sort of it tends to be a smaller committee, although we have one great committee that has quite a number of people called TDAC, Tourism, I'm not going to get the acronym right, Tourism, Education, does anybody? I'll get it and I'll publish it. But the TDAC Commission is really meant to help with cultural marketing, if you will, of the beauty of our town. And so that is a committee of people. And by the way, that committee, you don't have to actually be a citizen or an elector here in New Canaan. You can actually, if you work in town, if you work in, for instance, at the Museum and Historical Society, you could also serve on TDAC. So again, where cultural and tourism issues are important, and how we help promote the town. Any other? Yes. Tell me your name. I don't know how to
I'm
place
Valentina.
Hi, Valentina. How are you?
I was curious, I mean, you must get so many recommendations and ideas that people have, how you decide which ones you're going to prioritize and actually discuss with the limited time that you have.
So great question. So Valentina was saying, you're talking about charter revision, right? How do we take those 22 articles and themes that people have raised to us, and we go through it? Well, again, having the beauty of 11 members of the commission, we broke down into 3 subgroups and randomly assigned these themes and the specific articles to each group. Judy, for instance, was in group 3, and the work you focused on, Judy, was a lot, right?
Every group has had a lot. I mean, just huge. Yeah. Go ahead. And you have to decide what's important. You have to decide if this is worth getting into the fire and the belly, because some of these issues, it doesn't really matter too much. I mean, we looked at EMS, you attended our meeting, and there are things you could change, but it wasn't essential. There was nothing that was, really concerning to anybody. Everybody loves them. Everybody thinks they do a great job. It's not something you necessarily want to alter.
I want to make a point about that. So Judy raises a really good point. Remember that charter's only changed every 10 years. And so once you lock something in about a particular way something is done or a report that has to be filed, that can't be modified for 10 years. And if you open up the charter to make a change, you open up every single element of that charter.
And it may be wrong. I mean, we may be making decisions, or the electorate may be voting on things that they wish they hadn't in 3 or 4 years. So you have an opportunity in 10 years to reverse it if that happens. But it's not. It's interesting that what has already been passed, nobody really wants to. They can hear me. I've got a loud voice. But nobody really wants to reverse any of them. It doesn't look like they're not working,
Yeah,
It's
a lot.
amazing.
Yeah,
It's come out really well.
we're a very fortunate town in that there are some very good things that in how we're structured, and there is a hesitation about changing things that are working. But as we say, there is always room for improvement. But I'll just add, our town also is governed by something called bylaws and ordinances. These are the laws of our town. Those are established by the town council. They may be modified more frequently than the charter. Those tend to have much more detail as to how things operate. For instance, the police commission be much more detailed in terms of traffic regulation. And so those are things that, and Judy and I and our fellow commissioners found, people come up, I think parking should be better over here. Well, that's an ordinance. That's not a charter change. In fact, the list is starting to grow in terms of the things that we're going to be recommending to the town council that might need updating in the bylaws and ordinances. Some of them are rather old, and so we'll be recommending that
So
those
the
have to
town
be
council
considered.
takes the lead on.
So the town council is the one who they have a subcommittee called bylaws and ordinances, and they're the ones, for instance, right now, I think everybody knows they're currently looking at the leaf blower situation and whether or not to establish an ordinance require in terms of leaf blowers. That wouldn't be something that the charter would ever take up, because 10 years from now, who knows what'll exist, in terms of, so you can see why the charter is really about the fundamental structure of our government, whereas bylaws and ordinances are meant to deal with issues like leaf blowers and others, as we go. So that's something that I think how we're able to do it is that the number we have, while it's a lot, we've done this before. We know we can do it, and we have sort of segregated the duties, and then we bring them all back and we vote as a full commission. Let me just say a quick word about that too, Laura, and then I'm going to go. So we as a commission, we under state statute will make our recommendation in a draft report that goes out in early May. We expect that we'll get some feedback from the town council where they'll review our recommendations. They might come back to us and say, yeah, we think you should add this, or might want to reconsider it. Whatever our final report is, we might accept or reject what the town council suggests. Our final report goes before the town council. If we did not make a recommended change to the charter, for instance, if we did not say that the Board of Finance should be an elected position, nothing goes on the ballot. It's only changes that we make to the charter. Recommended changes are the only ones. Now, the town council can reject that, but they can't change it. They can't say, no, sorry, now we want to put it in front of the voters. We want this to be an elected position. They cannot change what the Charter Revision Commission puts forward in terms of change. They can reject it, but they can't change what we're saying. Is that clear? Okay. Laura.
Question was, which was going to be, what why, because you mentioned earlier that there's a vote that has happened in the past and some things got rejected and some did not. So
Yeah.
I guess that explains the answer to that. But then what happens if the town council rejects something?
Then it just doesn't go forward to the ballot. So they have to accept our report.
But if your report is recommending maintain the status quo,
Yes.
can they reject that, or can they only reject changes?
They cannot change what our recommendation is. If we don't say that we're going to have any change, for instance, to P and Z, they can't come back and say, yes, you have to go forward and make it elected. Oh, okay. So it's only changes to the charter. If they accept it, they still have to accept it, but any changes to the charter that go on the ballot, we don't put before the electorate, you choose. Should it be elected or should it be appointed? You give them one thing, and that one thing is only if it is a change to the existing process. Is that clear? Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Wendy? Wendy has actually been, I did the same at Lapham. She's going to ask me, you might not ask me the same question.
No, I just came, everyone seems to know my name because I sit at the meeting, so I know about
she's
town
great,
council,
yeah.
finance.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm fascinated.
Good.
And they're very civil, and I went to a town council meeting before this, and they said any comments, and they're very thorough.
Yeah,
And
good.
it's an amazing experience. I have another question, though, about the elected, appointed, I think
Yeah.
it's appointed of the housing authority.
The housing
And,
authority, yes.
Any information on what decisions are made or how it stands now?
So again, that's going to be part of our recommended process. When there's a vacancy for the housing authority, that would be publicized. Our recommendation might be that it will be publicized either on a website or what have you, that there is a vacancy, and then there's a process that would take place. I will say the housing authority is not in the charter. And so again, it's under ordinance, and but it's not in the charter. A number of boards and commissions are not in the charter. The Utilities Commission is not in the charter. So because they are seasoned or for whatever reason changes, the housing authority is also governed by state statute as well. So if there are going to be changes at the state level, that's what you might be following, those guidelines. So it's going to be actually reviewed as to whether or not it does go into the charter, but that's an example. And I would say, where we have vacancies, we'd recommend those to also go, to be considered for housing authority. I will also say, for appointments now, most of them go through Board of Selectmen. The full board will review any appointments with a couple of exceptions. One is the Board of Finance, goes through Board of Selectmen. You have to be approved by the Board of Selectmen, and you have to be approved by the Town Council. The Ethics Board has to go through that same process, and the Audit Committee or Audit Board has to go through the same process. Everything else just goes through the Board of Selectmen. We may be considering, it'll be before the commission, whether or not to also add P&Z members to actually not only be approved by the Board of Selectmen, but possibly adding the Town Council there. So there's two groups that would possibly consider that, just as they do currently for Board of Finance. Or land use possibly as well. Yeah. So that's under discussion, or will be. Thank you for your question.
The housing authority will be something that.
We'll be talking about that, yeah. We haven't gotten to that topic
gotten
yet.
there yet.
Yeah. We've got 4 or 5 weeks before our report's due. Yeah. A lot of things to cover, but thank you for that question. Yeah. Anybody? Yeah. Anyone else? Any questions or comments? Yes.
Hi, my name's Linda. Hi,
Linda.
I came for information. I haven't even read the charter. So when you talk about the charter, it defines the structure,
Yes.
The governance structure
Correct.
of the town. Does it define for like the commissions bipartisan, who is on because years and years ago, it was suggested that I join the Environmental Commission.
Oh.
And I was told that and I don't know if it's still true, that the ratio of participants is based on the ratio of Republicans to Democrats or whatever, and that if I was an independent, chances are I wouldn't be selected. So I don't know if that still exists.
Well, that's one of the things we'd like to improve, but let me tell you what the charter says. The charter has something, it's under state statutes called minority representation. And that means for, say, a 7-member board, I'll just use that as an example, no one party may exceed 5 members, actually. So it's a 7-member board. No one party can have more than 5 members. So if you happen to be a Republican or a Democrat and there's already 5 members and there's a spot that's open, and if you don't fit in the other categories of non-Republican or Republican or Democrat, that minority representation may preclude you, depending on what your party is, from serving in that vacancy. However, and you're right. So you might be an unaffiliated or independent designated. Right now, the idea would be that you want to encourage more unaffiliates or independents to actually raise their hand. And right now, that minority representation still exists. However, in almost all but 2 of our boards and commissions, it's much more diverse in terms of the distribution between parties, and many more unaffiliated candidates are actually seated on a number of these boards and commissions. So I think it's changed from the days, we don't even have an environmental commission anymore.
Well, the Conservation Commission.
Because it became the Conservation Commission, so yeah. So I think it's
That's
one.
new.
That is
The
new.
unaffiliated that's new.
So when you see us, publicizing more opportunities, hopefully everybody, especially unaffiliates, would also be willing to raise their hand and participate. That'd be great.
How will it be publicized?
So that needs to be determined. Right now, I'll tell you, the surrounding towns, they use their website to publicize. It could be. Yeah, I would suggest then you also reach out to the Sentinel and to the New Canaanite and to also publish there, just a sort of a standing list so that people know. Yeah. Wendy?
Another basic question. Where can we find the charter review that you're reviewing now?
So great question. So if you go to newcanaan.info, your website, newcanaan.info, and you click on the tab that says Government, and then you click on Charter Revision Commission. It'll list all the agendas, all the minutes, all the videos of all of our meetings, as well as the draft report that we're working on. We're on version 6 already. And you click on draft reports and it'll show you what changes have been made thus far. And we're keeping that up to date. So every time we meet, every time we make a change, it goes into our website so you can take a look and follow along. There was an original, and now there is 6. Yes, version 6 we're up to. That's correct. Yeah, we are up to version 6. Great. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much for your participation and your interest. Again, we're a public commission. We welcome people to come to. We have got a couple more meetings this month. We publish those dates on that same website I mentioned. We encourage you to participate. The public hearing is on April 14th. We also have a public survey that is open to everybody. We've had 155, I think, members of the public who've participated in that as well. But we find in general that people like to hear first what we're thinking and what we're discussing, and then people react, gee, I don't agree with you, or yes, I agree. And we're getting some really great feedback, and we appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you so much for coming,
Kathleen.
Kathleen.
Thank you, Mickey. Thank you all for
This is great.
your participation.